What's going on, guys? Derek here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Now, it's Friday, so you know what that means. It is a top 5 list. In today's top 5 video, we have the top 5 bounce back candidates of the 2018 season. Before I do jump right in though, just want to shout out the fact that Nick and I are both on Twitter. If any of you guys have not followed us on there yet, I'll throw it up on the screen. Give us a follow. We're going to be pumping out stuff on there. So, with that being said, let's jump right into the 2018 bounce back candidates. The first player on this list is Joe Mixon. Now, Joe Mixon was definitely one of the most controversial picks coming into the 2017 fantasy draft. We all knew he had all the talent in the world, but the biggest question marks were in regards to his opportunity share. Unsurprisingly to anybody, that opportunity share did end up finding its way to Mixon. The only problem was he just completely struggled, and honestly, he just looked terrible. His 2017 finish was about 913 total yards and just 4 touchdowns. Definitely disappointing considering he was taken in the 4th round. Not only that, he was being compared to players like Le'Veon Bell. So when you took him, you thought that you were getting this home run pick and that you were really paying less because of all the risk. Well, it turns out he was definitely far from a home run, to put it lightly. Now, a lot of people are quick to point to the fault of the offensive line and their struggles, which is fair, because they ranked 22nd in yards before contact. So 22nd in yards before contact, that was good for just 1.2 yards before the actual first initial contact. Yards before contact is probably the best stat you can use for grading a run blocking offensive line, because if the running back doesn't even get an opportunity to move 2 yards out before getting contacted, then you really can't fault the running back for that. Now in 2016, they actually averaged 2 yards per carry before initial contact, and Jeremy Hill was only able to average 3.8 yards per carry, and Giovanni Bernard was only able to average 3.7. So theoretically, with a better run blocking line, these two running backs did not even perform as well. Now, we're definitely not making an excuse for Mixon's poor play. He only averaged 3.5 yards per carry, which is just abysmal. But on the bright side, we did see that he was just as good as a pass catcher as he was advertised. When you're catching 30 of 34 passes that are thrown your way and able to maintain a 9.6 average yards per reception, you're definitely known as a pass catching running back. So that brings him in that territory where he can actually be a 3-down back. He's got the build for it, he's got the size for it, and he has the hands for it. His 9.6 yards per carry was actually able to outpace Giovanni Bernard, which we know is an actual pass catching specialist. You guys know that we're not just going to sit here and suggest Mixon as a bounce back candidate in 2018 unless we really do believe that he has a strong chance. His numbers from 2017 can be a little bit deceiving. I mean, the truth is Mixon was looking better towards the end of the season. He even started averaging 5 yards per carry through the final 4 games. And we also have to take into consideration that he only received 178 carries. We haven't seen enough of Mixon yet to claim that he really can't do it. Everyone loved to compare him to Le'Veon Bell last year, but then forgot that Le'Veon Bell averaged 3.5 yards per carry his entire rookie season too, and that was on 244 carries. As for 2018 though, the Cincinnati Bengals are doing what they can to shore up the offensive line. Heading into 2018, they drafted 2 linemen, including a first-round center in Billy Price. The center was definitely a position that they struggled in last year. They had Russell Bodine starting for him last year, who ranked 25th at the position. Bodine now moved over to the Bills' mangled offensive line, and now the new rookie Price should be able to move in and make an immediate impact. The thing he was actually known for was being able to spell out gap shooters, so that should really help out Mixon in the trenches. Then you have the fact that more recently it came out that he shed 10 pounds this offseason and is looking to come back stronger than ever. You should always take note when any rusher loses a significant amount of weight. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but we have seen in the past that it improves both quickness and elusiveness. These are 2 things that Mixon could definitely improve on. Now, where does he stand on the draft boards? Well, Mixon is falling into that last tier of running backs who will actually be receiving the lion's share of carries. If you ask us, he is as safe of an RB2 as they come. Take advantage of the recency bias, grab Mixon. The only reason you're getting a discount on him is because other owners from last year just still have a bad taste in their mouth. The next player on this list is Jameis Winston, coming in at QB 20. And you've heard us say it before and you'll hear us say it again. The best thing about this year's fantasy draft is just how deep the quarterback position is. And we all know that this year more than ever, there's absolutely no reason to take a quarterback early, and one of the biggest bounce back candidates we have at the QB position is Jameis Winston. Winston was highly regarded as a breakout candidate in 2017. He did have his struggles though. He fought through some early injuries, and the offense was overall just a little inconsistent. You could definitely say that Winston disappointed on a season-long basis, especially considering the expectations that everybody had entering the season. But it's hard to imagine that Jameis was actually 100% healthy when he was on the field. Dirk Cutter even came out and said that he shouldn't have kept him playing after he got hurt in week 6, and it wasn't until week 9 until he actually left the field. Then, after being sidelined for nearly a month, he returned in his final 5 games. Since then, he was averaging 317 yards, 2 touchdowns to just 1 interception. In fantasy points per game, that was over 20 points. If he was able to maintain that type of production, he would be a top 5 quarterback by the end of the year. Now, we know that's asking a lot, and it's a small sample size, and we wouldn't expect that type of production when healthy throughout the entire year, but to his credit, he was able to complete 67% of his passes through that span, and throughout the entire season, he was still 4th in yards per attempt. Pro Football Focus even gave him the 10th highest rating of any quarterback in 2017. And you're talking about the guy who's being taken at QB 20 who is uninjured. Is it more likely that Winston was just incredibly lucky to end the season, or is it more likely that he was playing injured through a major part of the season? You be the judge. Moving on though, besides his individual stats, just look at the composition of his team. They just paid Cameron Brate, who has been amazing in the red zone for Winston, and even if he battles with OJ Howard for targets, that's just 2 big-bodied options at the tight end position for Winston to throw to. Mike Evans had one of his down production years, especially in the touchdown department, and if you're like the rest of us, we all expect him to have a bounce back. Who's going to gain the most from that? Besides Mike Evans, it's Jameis Winston. Then moving over to Deshaun Jackson, his other weapon. Another thing that we say a lot is that free agent wide receivers usually take a year to get accustomed to the new offenses. Deshaun Jackson is definitely the type of player who can take advantage in year 2. And then do we even have to mention Chris Godwin? Just keep that name in the back of your heads. Trust me, it's going to be one that we're going to be talking about throughout this offseason. Chris Godwin. So we have all these faith in these receivers. How come Jameis Winston gets no respect? Then we move on to the running back situation. They have no real running backs you can count on. Yeah, you got Ronald Jones. He is a sleeper, and we're okay with you drafting him as a flyer. But would it surprise you if the player that they try to utilize the most in this offense is Charles Sims? It really wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, he's not going to be the first and second down back, but I could see him having a major role in this run game while they kind of cycle through the other guys. Why else would they sign him to just a 1-year extension, which is essentially just a prove-it deal? We love Marcus Mariota and Patrick Mahomes. Those guys are both in this similar range, but there are just too many signs that are just pointing to Jameis Winston having a much better season. You just can't ignore it at this point. The next player on this list should come as no surprise. That's Kyle Rudolph of the Minnesota Vikings. Coming in at TE7, expect that to change. Hunter Henry just tore his ACL, and Rudolph is set up to be one of the better value picks of the 2018 draft. Legitimately, he has top 5 potential, yet he is one of the least targeted tight ends in his tier. It's a little understandable though, because owners from last year are probably a little bitter. He was coming off a 2016 season where he received 131 targets. He was definitely a big focal point of the offense in that year, and his target totals dropped down to 81. Now that's undeniably a significant drop in total opportunity, and it's likely one of the reasons that he's being taken so low in such a really weak tight end class. And we're here to tell you why he makes a great bounce back candidate and why you should target him, and we don't really like targeting tight ends to begin with. So to break it down, in 2015 he finished as the tight end 15. Not impressive, but not a complete bust, definitely more of a streamer. 2016, the tight end 2. Okay, that was definitely a weaker year for the tight end class. Then last year on 81 targets, TE8. I mean, this guy is definitely in the mix. TE8 on just 81 targets. His target total ranked 11th. Rudolph saw fewer targets than Eric Ebron, Jason Witten, and Jared Cook. And unlike the others, he actually made the most of them. Rudolph was a top performer in many of the major categories. Categories like drop rate, which he was first, second in pass blocking efficiency, 5th in deep passing, and 8th in slot performance. If you ask me, he wasn't given even enough credit for what he did in 2017 and what he was able to do with such a limited opportunity. And with that limited opportunity basically tells you that you're drafting him at his floor. How can he go down from 81 targets? There's just no way. So if we think that's his floor, then where's his ceiling? What's going to change heading into this year? Well, that's one player and one player only. That's Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins targeted the tight end position on 24.4% of all pass plays in Washington. That's an outrageous number. Nearly 1 in every 4 balls was being thrown to the tight end. Throughout an entire season, that type of production averaged out to 137 targets, totaling 99 receptions for 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns per season. And let's be honest, Rudolph is the only real tight end that's in Minnesota, and his superior pass blocking efficiency is going to be the reason he remains on the field. You know, if Cousins throws him the ball, he has one of the best chances of any tight end of bringing that ball down. We all saw how dominant Jordan Reed was in the red zone, and we can't admit that Rudolph isn't quite the receiver that Reed is, but unlike Reed, Rudolph can actually stay healthy. Now, I said it earlier and I'll say it again, we don't normally take tight ends early, nor do we recommend drafting them, but if Rudolph is available later in the draft, you got to pull the trigger on him. You can't pass up that type of value. The next player we have will actually come as a surprise to you guys, and that's Randall Cobb, coming in at wide receiver 42. One thing that is for sure about Cobb is that nobody's going to be excited drafting him, but honestly, he could be one of the better late round wide receiver targets this year. We definitely have him as a bounce back candidate for a reason, although he does have the stigma of a player that's not going to be drafted because he's targeted, but more of he's being drafted because there was just simply not a better player available. When you break it down though, he is kind of a smart pick. Contrary to popular belief, Cobb has not lost a step. The only thing that he has lost is his opportunity share. In 2016, he was 20th in wide receiver rating and followed that up, finishing 18th in 2017. Throughout that span, while he went quiet, he also ranked as a top 20 slot receiver in both years. The lowest he finished in drop rate too was 8th, and the year before that, he was 1st. The only real competition he has for targets is Jimmy Graham and Devontae Adams, who are both really more of red zone threats than anything else. Even though Adams has been nothing short of spectacular, we can say that with honesty, he's really more of a red zone weapon. He's never had a 1,000 yard season. He should certainly break that milestone this season, but in Aaron Rodgers' first game back from injury, Cobb had 14 targets compared to Adams' 7. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that those target splits will remain that way. I'm just saying Cobb is not the forgotten man in this offense. That forgotten man was Jordy Nelson, and he is now gone. This team is going to need someone they can count on between the 20s, and that's exactly where Cobb is going to make up most of his production. This type of role is going to make him immediately valuable in PPR, and an increased opportunity is all Cobb needs to make the most of his situation. His sure hands are going to be a safety valve for Rodgers, and we can't forget that Cobb has had, even though it's a while ago, multiple seasons with 8 touchdowns or more. Unsurprisingly, those seasons came on 2 of the 3 years he was targeted over 100 times. If you ask me, 100 targets is definitely in the range of outcomes for Cobb if he can stay healthy. The Packers literally could have cut Cobb and saved over $9 million in cap space, but they chose to keep him, and we think that's because they intend to use him. Now, he may seem like just another aging wide receiver, but he's really only 27 years old right now. He'll be 28 when the season starts, but that means he still could have a few good years left in him. And at wide receiver 42, it's really not a lofty investment for a late round wide receiver that actually has some upside. Okay, and for the 5th and final bounce back candidate of the 2018 season, it's another player that we love, and it's Dalvin Cook. Now, Dalvin Cook comes in as the 2nd Viking on this list, and he definitely has something to prove this year. Every owner should be actively seeking out shares of Cook. Why? Because Cook possesses incredible ball carrier vision and has the ability to bust out big plays every time he touches the ball. Not to mention, he's going to be on one of the best offenses in 2018. And the thing you want the most is you want these good offenses that have solid defenses that are going to have positive game scripts the entire season, and that's exactly what Dalvin Cook will have. As for last season, he was really nothing short of incredible. He averaged through only 4 games, I know, limited sample size, but it was 111 total yards per game before the ACL took him out for the season. Now listen to us, that's no fear of owning him in 2018. The ACL tear being in week 4, yeah, it sucked last season if you owned him, but it's actually a plus because he has had nearly a full year to recover. By the time he actually steps on the field, it's going to be a month shy of an entire year. Bouncing back to 2017 though, Dalvin Cook was already averaging 15 points per game, and that was with Jerick McKinnon. As we all know, Jerick McKinnon is now a 49er, which actually opens up more opportunities for Cook than he had last year while he was already dominant. McKinnon was averaging about 3 targets per game in which Cook was on the field, And we can say with almost certainty those targets are going to fall in Cook's direction, who is already receiving 4 targets per game on his own. So if we really want to dive into the numbers, that's going to equal about 7 targets per game. Let's say one of those 7 goes to Murray, who's really not a good pass catcher, but let's say one of them goes to Murray, so let's say 6 targets per game. That's realistically about 96 targets on the season, and with Cook's solid catch rate, that would be about 66 receptions. That is definitely a good floor in PPR if you ask me. Now, could that be on the high side? Maybe. But it certainly wouldn't surprise anyone considering Latavius Murray only caught 17 balls all last season combined. Clearly his role is going to be used in a different way. Now speaking of Latavius Murray, the Vikings do have a history of successfully using 2 backs, so I do believe Latavius Murray will have some sort of a role, but it's not going to be like this Matt Asiata, Jerick McKinnon duo that they had in previous years, where Jerick McKinnon was between the 20s catching all the passes, and as soon as they got into the goal line, Matt Asiata took over and tried to run it in. I think you'll see a different split because the only difference between them is that Cooks can actually do the best of both things. He's the better back on the ground, he's the better back in the receiving game. They're probably going to use Murray as more of a way of keeping Cook's legs fresh. In big time situations, you're going to guarantee that Cook's going to be on the field and he's not going to lose all those red zone opportunities to Latavius Murray. What we saw last year was really just a taste of what he can do. The reason I say that is because the Vikings didn't even get the kinks worked out of their offensive line until later on in the season. And this year, again, we mentioned it earlier, they don't have Case Keenum. They have Kirk Cousins. There's no way you can put all your focus on stopping the run game when you have that type of receiving weapons that Kirk Cousins has. Take it from us, had it not been for the injury in 2017, Cook would likely be drafted ahead of Gordon and Fournette. So take that draft day discount on this bounce back candidate and trust us, you will not regret it. Alright everybody, that's going to do it for today's video. Don't forget, follow us both on Twitter. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We thank you for watching and we will catch you on the next one.